Welcome to my course on Internet Security. Thank you for taking the time to learn about cybersecurity and learn how to protect yourself. We see headlines every day on this bank hacked or this company hacked or these credit cards stolen. And it's mostly because people don't know the effective techniques to protect themselves against hackers. We all know somebody who's been hacked or somebody who's had their identity stolen. And there are simple things that you can do to protect yourself. So in this course, I'm going to go over a lot of the emerging cybersecurity threats out there, talk about how you can protect yourself and protect your family against them. So for those of you who didn't watch the course promo, my name's Kyle Slawczyk, and I've been working in cybersecurity for 10 years. And I've done everything in cybersecurity. I've been a help desk admin, I've worked incident response, and most recently, I'm considered a white hat hacker. So companies pay me to break into their company infrastructure as an actual hacker would do and tell them where they go wrong. So I have a lot of experience in thinking like an attacker, thinking like a hacker, because I have to emulate them on a day-to-day basis. You've already taken the first step by taking this course. I'm really excited that we're going to go on this journey together and learn about cybersecurity and learn how to protect yourself. So look forward to seeing you in the rest of the course. So I wanted to start the course off by talking about what motivates a hacker. And the reason we talk about this is because the more you understand the mindset and what a hacker's motivation is, the better you're going to be able to identify current threats and identify issues where things seem a little fishy. So let's talk about what a typical hacker is. Typically, the media portrays a hacker as, the loner kid in his mom's basement eating Hot Pockets and whatnot. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the truth, and that's not the way most hackers identify themselves. A lot of them are like you and I. They may be professionals on a day-to-day basis. They may work in hacking groups and whatnot, but most of the time, the motivation for a hacker that would go after individuals is money. And the reason is there's a low risk and a high reward when you're talking about hacking, when you're talking about hacking individuals to get money. It's not like back in the day when you would go and rob a bank. You're robbing a bank, you have to go into the bank, there's potentially guards there, there's issues for alarms to be tripped, there's cops that could come after you. Online, it's a lot harder to get caught. You can be very, very sneaky, and you can be anyone you want. So tracing a hack to an actual person is in the industry what we call attribution. And attribution is extremely difficult. In fact, most companies don't even do attribution. They worry about attackers' objectives, but they don't go after the actual attacker because it's so difficult to do. So that's what a hacker is motivated by, is it's easy and there's low risk, right? So what do they do to make money? Well, hackers can do a couple of things. The big thing that's going around right now is a scam called ransomware. And it's a virus that hackers have coded up. And they go in, when the virus is installed on your computer, it encrypts all of your data and then holds it for ransom. And you have to pay in a non-traceable form of currency money to unlock all your files. Now, we'll talk about ransomware later, but the easy part of that is that there's no loss for them. They get 100 people, maybe they send out 1,000 emails, and of those 1,000 emails, 100 people install it. They haven't really spent any money on their hack, and they've gotten 100 people infected. And of those 100 people, maybe 50 of them pay. It's an easy win for them. There's other ways that they make money nowadays. we used to see a lot of banking viruses, and those banking viruses would monitor your keystrokes and then empty out your bank. And that was easy for a lot of hackers as well, because your bank guarantees the money, and if there's an issue, then they'll reimburse you. So from a mindset perspective, they're not necessarily stealing from you, they're stealing from the bank, which is a lot easier for most people to kind of digest. There's also tax return fraud, mostly prevalent in the United States. I don't know about other countries, but in the United States, filing a fraudulent tax return and getting that return back to the hacker as opposed to the person who actually deserves the return is another common way of them getting money. So these are the things that hackers think about, and this is what I want you to think about throughout the course. When I talk about, when I describe new and emerging threats, think about, put yourself in the shoes of that attacker and think about how that attacker would make money off of this hack. And we'll continue to talk about that throughout the course. So hope to see you in the next lesson. All right, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about something that in the industry we talk about all the time. It's called risk. And that's basically what cybersecurity is in a nutshell, is it's risk. So how do we define risk? What does it mean for you? Well, there's two factors to risk. There is a threat and a vulnerability. So we define a threat as an actor or someone malicious who will exploit a vulnerability in order to gain access to your private information. The vulnerability is defined as something that is not secure, right? If you want to think of it in terms of like armor, it would be a hole in armor, right? That's a vulnerability. And an actor would be somebody, if you're going on the armor analogy, is if you're fighting in, say, a sword fight, your opponent would be your threat, and the vulnerability would be the hole in your armor. So we think about this from cybersecurity all the time, and we have to constantly assess our risk, and that helps us to determine how much effort and money and whatnot we want to put into fixing the vulnerability or dealing with the threat. We can do this in our personal lives too. It's called a threat model. So what you want to do is you want to ask yourself a lot of questions. You want to ask your things like, what do I have that's worth protecting? And who is it that I want to protect that from? That can be hackers. It can be other people too. It doesn't have to necessarily be a malicious person. Maybe you have some sensitive data that you want to hide from your business partner or from competitors if you're in a small business or you're working in an office, right? And then you have to ask yourself, how likely is it that I'll need to protect this information? Is it public information? If so, then I probably don't need to protect it that much. Where is it stored? What is it we're talking about? So then we finally want to ask ourselves, how bad would it be if I failed at protecting this information? And that's where the main part of risk comes in, I think, is what would happen if, say, your social security number got out on the internet? That's something that we have to think about. And then finally, the last big question we have to ask ourselves is, how much trouble am I willing to go through to protect this information? And this really will help us develop the amount of effort we're going to need to put into protecting particular information. And in the next assignment, I'm going to want you to basically fill out those questions. Pick a topic of something that you want to protect, and answer those questions in the assignment. And we're not going to have this be a submit to instructor assignment because it might be potentially sensitive. But I want you to fill it out for your own sake and think about what is it that you have to protect. And so that's how we think about threats. And again, in the rest of the course, we're going to talk about a lot about vulnerabilities. So we want to think about vulnerability and threat to look at the overall picture of risk. So with that, we'll see you in the next course or in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back and welcome to my section on passwords. Now, I wanted to spend an entire section, an entire set of videos talking about passwords because they are probably your first line of defense and probably one of your best lines of defense at securing yourself and your family against hackers and threats on the internet. If you get one thing out of this class, I'd love for it to be how to create a secure password. So make sure that you pay attention to the next set of videos on how to create good passwords. I'm going to give you some good tips and tricks on how to make sure that your passwords are long, they're complex, and they're secure, but more importantly, that you can remember them. So with that, I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about how attackers use your password and how they get your password. One of the biggest ways that we see attackers and hackers get your password is they'll go after some of the bigger sites with lots of members. One of the big examples a while back was a couple years ago, LinkedIn had a big hack, exposed emails and passwords and everything else. So one of the ways that attackers will use or get access to your password is what we call brute forcing. Now, to explain brute forcing, I need to explain how a website stores your password. When you go online and you register for a new account, if the website is doing their job right, what they'll do is they take the password that you type in and they push it through an algorithm, what we call a one-way hashing algorithm. And that algorithm takes your password and encrypts it into a very long string of encrypted text. Now, the idea behind that and the mathematics behind the one-way hashing algorithm is that you can't then take the encrypted text and decrypt it to get your password. So all the websites do is they store what we call the hash, right? The result of taking your plain text password and pushing it through that algorithm. So they store your username and the hash. And when you log in every time, it takes that password that you put into the login box and it puts it through that same hashing algorithm. And the idea is that as long as the two hashes match, then you're granted access because you put in the password the exact same way every time. Every time you push it through the hashing algorithm, it should spit out the exact same set of encrypted text. So they just comparing the hash. Well, that's what attackers are going to do too, right? They're going to take the hash of your password if they get it from the database, and they're going to brute force it, right? They're going to attempt to check every combination of letters, numbers, and special characters out there to push that through. So they'll take a hash of the word A and they'll compare it against your password. Then they'll take a hash of the word AA and they'll check it against your hash. And so basically they're going through the entire alphabet, A, B, A, C, and going through the entire alphabet, and then they'll get into numbers, and then they'll get into special characters, and they're going to try every possible combination of letters, numbers, and special characters until they find a hash that matches yours, and then they're able to they have your plain text password. Now the problem with this is it takes a long time. There are millions and millions, if not trillions, of password combinations out there. So going through and calculating all of those hashes is very time consuming. It takes up a lot of space. So what attackers will instead do is they'll use dictionaries. And a dictionary is just a it's a file with a bunch of words from the English language. Sometimes attackers will put in passwords from other dumps that are out on the internet, and they'll try and go through that first. And what I would say, because I do this in my white hat hacking for corporations, is I'd say about 30 to 40% of the passwords out there are going to be in somebody's dictionary. So you want to make sure that your password is long and unique. It would take a long time to go through the entire hashing space of, say, a 10 or 12 character password. Right now, an 8-character password is considered insecure because it doesn't take that much time to brute force an 8-character password. One of the ways attackers will use your password against you is a thing we call password reuse. And password reuse is basically most people will reuse the same password on multiple accounts. So think about all the online accounts that you have, your email, your Facebook, your Twitter, all of those accounts. How many of you at least have the same password in a couple of those different locations? If they have one password and one email against you, they can attempt to use that password in multiple places. And if you've got the same password, then they're able to not only get into your email, but they're also able to get into, say, your Twitter or your Facebook or your bank account or whatnot. And so password reuse is a big thing in the industry, and we harp on it a lot on users. It's very difficult to make sure that you have a unique password for every account, but it is vitally important because a compromise of one system where they get your password then compromises all of your systems. So knowing that, we're going to talk about some strategies in the next couple of videos on how you can make your passwords more secure and how you can make your passwords more easy to remember and harder for attackers to get. So with that, I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to talk to you in this video about how do you create a better password. And one of the best strategies I can give you is creating a longer password. A longer password means that it's much harder to brute force. As it stands today, if you have a 6-character password with uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters, that 6-character password can be brute forced in about 12 hours. If you increase that to a 12-character password, it would take almost 2,000 years to brute force that password. So just by doubling the password size, you have significantly increased the amount of time it would take an adversary to brute force your password. So along with a longer password, you want to make sure that your password has enough randomness in it. And we've all seen the password requirements on a lot of our banks and email providers where they want you to have an uppercase and a lowercase and a special character and a number. So what I want you to realize is that the reason that they're doing that is because it increases the amount of potential passwords that an adversary has to go through in their brute force. If you just use lowercase letters, then you have 26 combinations in a 6-character password. Each position would have 26 combinations, right? You add another uppercase, you have additional 26. You add numbers, you add special characters. You can see that each time you increase the number of number of potential characters in a position of your password. Another way you can protect yourself is by ensuring that your passwords have all the character classes in them. We've seen that when you log in or you create a password for, say, your bank or your email, it oftentimes asks you to have an uppercase, a lowercase, a number, and a special character. And I want you to understand the reason that they're doing this. When you're brute forcing, right, you have, say, a 6-character password. You have 6 positions that you can put a letter in. If you know that the website only accepts lowercase letters, then each position has 26 possible combinations. If you add in uppercase, then you double those possible combinations. If you add in numbers, you add more possible combinations, and same with special characters. So now, as you add all of those character classes to your password, you increase the amount of time that an attacker would need to brute force a password, because each position has more characters. So there's more possible combinations in a password that has something from all 4 of those character classes. So in conclusion, I want you to understand that a longer password means it's harder to brute force, and making sure that you have some semblance of all of the character classes in your password means that it's much, much harder for an attacker to brute force your password and to gain access into your accounts. With that, we're going to talk in the next couple of lessons now how do you do that and make sure that you remember those. So with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk to you about passphrases. A passphrase, unlike a password, is a much longer password. You want to think up of a phrase that is something that you will remember, and you can use that as your password. And the idea is that most passwords are kind of short, 12 characters or so, 12 characters being one of the more secure ones. A passphrase is a full sentence, and it could be much more secure than just using that small password. So you want to think about things that you will remember. You can think about a childhood memory, or a book you read a long time ago. So a good example would be, say, something that a book you liked as a child, right? So I will give you the example. I could make a passphrase for myself that would say, as a child, Toad and Frog was my favorite book series. And that's a very long password that now I can enter into a lot of websites, and it will be much harder for an attacker to brute force that. And it's also something that, again, is not necessarily public information. It was a like of mine a long time ago. So you can enter that in and use that password. One thing you also want to make sure that you do when you're creating a passphrase is that you're not taking, say, a phrase out of a book, or a phrase that is well known. So I've seen a lot of people do this. They'll pick a book off their shelf, and they'll turn to a random page, and they'll take the first sentence, and that'll be their passphrase. That's not necessarily the most secure way of doing it, mostly because most of those books are in print form, and an attacker can now use all of those sentences in that book and create a password list where they might be able to brute force your password. So I would recommend making sure that this phrase is something that is special to you, and not necessarily in print, or a phrase or a saying that somebody else has. So there is an issue with using a passphrase. And the issue is that there are a lot of websites, and I don't know why they do this, but they limit the number of characters that you can use. Some I've seen, I think it's silly, that will say you have to have a password that's no longer than 12 characters. I think one of the big things we see, and the reason we see this, is because these are sites where if you have to reset your password, typically you have to call somebody. These can be your banks, typically, and if you forget your password, you call the bank and they reset your password. by setting a limit on a smaller password, you're typically going to reduce the number of calls that people are going to have saying, I forgot my password. But on sites that allow you large passwords, passphrases are a really good way of making sure that you have a very unique and strong password. So in conclusion, passphrases are a way to create a very long password, and you can use them in most sites that don't have a password length requirement. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk to you about unique passwords. And we already talked to you about password reuse. Unique passwords is a way to mitigate against password reuse. So it means that you have a unique password for every website that you have an account on. Now, this is usually pretty difficult to do. You may have hundreds of accounts out there, and that means remembering hundreds of passwords. So the most effective way of making sure that you have a unique password is to use a password manager and let that password manager generate a completely random password for you. And then have the password manager remember all those passwords for you. And we'll talk about password managers in a couple of videos, but another way to use unique passwords and to remember them yourself is take your secure password, right? The one that's long, it has all your character classes in it, and add the name of the website to the very end of your password. And so if your password is, and this is a very bad example, don't use the password, but let's say your password is password and you have a Gmail account. So you would change your password to password Gmail. And then that's a unique password for that site. And then if you've got a Facebook, it would be password Facebook. And again, so you're starting to see that it becomes easier to remember all of those unique passwords, but without using a password manager. But again, I still recommend, my recommendation for the most secure way to have unique passwords is to have a password manager. Have something completely random at every site that you go to. So in conclusion, password reuse is a way that attackers will use your password against you to get into all of your accounts, and the mitigation to that is using a unique password. So with that, we'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk to you about a strategy to create long, secure, and random passwords that are also very easy to remember. So this method is called the PAO method, or the PAO method. It's person, action, and object. And what you're doing here is you're creating a mnemonic to remember your password, okay? So the first thing you want to do is think about a person. I usually like to think about celebrity. It could be a family member, but in my example, I'm going to think about Bill Nye. And then you want to think about a place. It can be a place you went on vacation or somewhere special to you. And I'm going to think about Fenway Park. And then you want to think about an object that you can do an action on, all right? And my example would be chopping down a tree. The tree is the object and chopping it down is the action, right? So if you take all of those things together, you start to build a picture in your mind about Bill Nye chopping down a tree at Fenway Park. Now you can take that long string of words and you can make things a little differently, or you can make some of the characters different to make it a little bit more random, add some numbers in there, some special characters that kind of represent something you would do. So you would take this and then this is a way you remember that long password because you have that image in your head of Bill Nye chopping down a tree at Fenway Park. So in conclusion, the PAO method is a very effective way of creating a nice mnemonic to remember a very long and random password. And with that, see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video I want to talk to you about two-factor authentication. And we've seen it all over the place, and we're seeing it more and more in places around where they're recommending adding on two-factor authentication to your accounts. So what is two-factor authentication? In the industry, it's something we call something you have and something you know. Something you have is your phone, and something you know is your username and password. And in order to get into your account, you must have both things. You must know your username and password, and you must also have your phone. And so what two-factor authentication usually does is that when you log in, you'll put your username and password in, and then you'll be directed, if that's correct, you'll be directed to another screen that says, please enter your two-factor authentication code. And this is done in two different ways. The first way is through an app. The most common app out there is Google Authenticator. It's a free app you can download on both iOS and Android. And it basically generates a new random 6-digit code every 60 seconds. So you have to have your phone in order to put in that code. And once that code is put in, then you are able to get into your account. Now the other way that this is done is by the service sending you a text message with that same 6-digit code. Now the text message side of it is a little less secure than the app portion of it, just because there have been a couple of instances where people have been able to clone somebody's phone or listen in on text messages. It's difficult, but it has happened in the past, where you can, if you don't have a security setting with your mobile provider, sometimes attackers will call the mobile provider and say, hey, I lost my phone and I need a new one, or I've got a new one. Here's the information from the phone that the attacker has in their hand. And the phone company will just switch your service over to their phone, and then they get the text message instead of you. So that's the problem with the SMS style two-factor authentication. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you have to use the SMS style two-factor authentication. But in any instance where you're setting up two-factor authentication for whatever site you're working on, whether it be your bank or your email or your social media, if you have the choice to use an app like Google Authenticator, then you want to make sure that you're using that app. And usually it's pretty simple to set up. Most sites will allow you to go in, say, set up two-factor authentication, and it will provide you with a little barcode that you just open up the Google Authenticator and you click Add New, and it will basically open up your camera, and you just hover over the barcode and you're there. You've got your two-factor authentication set up. Now, this protects you even if your password were to be compromised. So an attacker now not only has to get your password, but they have to get your phone. They have to get that code in order to get into your accounts. If they don't have the code, the password is just useless. So having two-factor authentication is really one of the very best ways to secure any account out there. And you're seeing more and more sites enable it. In fact, there is a website, it's TwoFactorAuth.org, and you can go to that website and you can put in any service that you are currently using, and it will tell you whether or not it has two-factor authentication available or not. And if it does, typically on that site, it will have step-by-step instructions, or at least point you to the site's help desk article where it shows you how to set up those that two-factor authentication. So I highly recommend going out tonight and looking at all the accounts that you have, and if you don't have two-factor auth set up, go to twofactorauth.org, put in those sites, and follow the instructions on how to set up two-factor authentication. this is one of the very best ways of securing your system. So in conclusion, two-factor auth means that in order to log into your accounts, you have to have your phone, and there's two ways of doing it, via SMS or Google Authenticator, and it really is the absolute best way to secure your account. So with that, we'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome back. In this lesson, I want to talk with you about password managers and how important they can be at protecting all of your passwords. So we've talked all throughout this lesson about how do you create a secure password, something you can remember, and those are all great methods, but the absolute best way of creating a secure password is having it be completely random, something that you would never be able to remember. And the way you do this is by using a password manager. There are two types of password managers. There's an online password manager and an offline password manager. My recommendation for online password managers is Lastpass, and it is a service that is free. You can go and download the Lastpass vault, and there's a browser plugin for all of the browsers out there. And basically what it does is as you browse around and you log into things, it recognizes that you're logging in and it saves your password in a very secure encrypted vault. And so now all you have to do is remember the password to the vault. And then once you have the vault open, it will fill in your username and password everywhere you go. The other nice thing about Lastpass is that it has this random password generator, and you tell it, I want a 15-character password with all the special character classes, upper and lower case letters, numbers, and special characters. And it will randomly generate these very secure passwords. And this is another way you can, prevent password reuse, is by having Lastpass generate a brand new password for every account you have. And again, because you have the password manager, you don't have to remember all of those passwords. You just have to remember one very large password, and that is the password to your vault. Lastpass takes care of the rest. And a lot of people, the nice thing about Lastpass is that it syncs across multiple devices. So if you've got multiple computers in your household, or you have a computer at home and a computer at work, you can install the Lastpass browser plugin in all of those locations, and anytime you change your password on one system, it will update on all the systems you have. So now you have a way of making sure that your passwords are everywhere you need to go. Now, if you pay for Lastpass, you get some additional features. One of the biggest features, and the reason I pay for Lastpass, is that you get the Lastpass app on your phone. And so now you can access all of your passwords literally wherever you go. As long as your phone is with you, you can have that Lastpass vault with you. The other nice thing that Lastpass does is not only will it store passwords for you, but you can store almost anything in it. You store bank account information and social security numbers and whatnot. And it's all encrypted locally on your system and sent up to Lastpass's servers to be synced across to your multiple devices. But again, remember, all Lastpass has is a very highly encrypted blob of text. They can't get into it unless they have your master password. All right, and this is why Lastpass has had a few hacks in the past couple of years, and why I'm not concerned about those hacks, because again, my password is strong, and all I know that anybody was able to get would be an encrypted container, encrypted set of text, and based on the length of my password, I'll be long dead before they're able to brute force that password. So I recommend using Lastpass just because of how easy it is. Now, the other way you can do it is by using a offline password database. And this is for the more paranoid people out there. And again, in the cybersecurity world, paranoia is not a bad thing. So the more paranoid people out there will use a local password database, something that is stored on your computer and doesn't go out to the internet. And my recommendation for a local password database is KeePass. It's an open source application, and it allows you to store all your passwords in a nice encrypted vault. Same way it works with that Lastpass works, is that it will store all of your passwords, generate random passwords. The only difference is there's not a very good browser plugin for KeePass. There are a few out there that work all right, but nothing really as good as Lastpass. So most of the time when you're logging into a site, you're going to have to open up your KeePass database, find the site you want to log into, and copy, and it allows you to copy the password to your clipboard and paste it into the password box on the website. It's just a couple extra steps. It is more secure, but again, this has to go back to your risk profile and how much risk are you willing to accept. My risk profile says I think Lastpass is all right, and I'm willing to accept the strength of their security over having a private private KeePass database on my computer. The other thing with KeePass is there's no syncing. So if you have your KeePass on one system, it doesn't sync automatically with all your other computers. The only real way to get that to happen is if you have a syncing software, something like Dropbox or Google Drive or whatnot, and you can store the database there. That way when you update it, it updates in Dropbox, for example, and then it updates on all of the other systems that you have Dropbox on. That is one way, and one way around the syncing issue. In conclusion, password managers are really the best way to make sure that you have very random, unique passwords on all of your sites. You have to make sure that your master password is secure though, so you have to use the steps that we talked about in previous lessons to create a very secure master password. And with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, and welcome back. So in this video, I wanted to talk to you about Lastpass. In the previous video, when we talked about password managers, I mentioned Lastpass, and I wanted to give you a quick run through as to how it works. So this is the Lastpass website, and you can see that it has a browser extension, and you want to make sure that whatever browser you're using, you install the browser extension. It's got all of the most modern browsers out here. You've got Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, and Internet Explorer. And then basically you have when you set up your Lastpass account, you create a master password. This master password lets you into your Lastpass vault. This is the password you want to make sure that you're using a strong, memorable password for, because this is the password that is going to encrypt all of your other passwords. If the master password is encrypted or is not secure, then all of the passwords within your vault then become insecure. So making sure that you have a good master password is extremely important. You have your vault, and your vault is made up of sites and notes, and I'll show you my vault here in a little bit. But basically what happens is it uses a very strong encryption algorithm to encrypt any password or any data locally on your system, right? So it's local only encryption. And then that is sent up to the Lastpass server. And that local only encryption means that, Lastpass never sees your master password. It never knows what it is. you can also have the ability to set up that two-factor authentication. And again, two-factor authentication means that your master password and your phone are required to get into your LastPass vault. So with that, let's take a look at what LastPass looks like in the browser extension. You've got the LastPass browser plugin right here, and I'm going to click this, and it gives me a bunch of options. I can open my vault, and you can see that when it loads, it has all of my passwords here. And you can see all of the different accounts that I would have. And we can open up an account, and we can click launch, and that will take us to the login page for that account, and the browser will automatically fill in the username and password for that. You also have secure notes, and these are encrypted notes that you can put whatever you want in them. You can upload files, but I use them to kind of keep encryption keys, various encryption keys, my two-factor authentication backup codes, and whatnot. And then you have form fills, and all these form fills are basically addresses and credit card information, and LastPass has the ability to fill that information in automatically for you. Then you have the sharing center, and the sharing center is where you can share codes, and you can share passwords with other people. The sharing center you can only share passwords and other things with other people if you are a paying member of LastPass. That is a paid feature. So that is the basics of LastPass. You have that's the vault. You have here a generate a secure password, and this is really where LastPass comes into handy. So you can click on this, and you can tell it how long password you want. If I have 15 characters on here, but if I wanted a 20-character password, and you can tell it what types of character classes you want. And remember, we talked about the more character classes you have, the better you are, or the better your password is. You can then copy that password and paste it into a login form or a password change form, and LastPass will pick up that you have put in a new password and update your passwords automatically. So this is the basics of LastPass. They have a lot of great resources online in their help function, so I'm not going to go too in depth into what LastPass is, and I will just refer you to their website. But they are it is one of my favorite cybersecurity programs out there, and one that I heavily use on a day-to-day basis. So again, in conclusion here, LastPass is a great encrypted password vault. It has a browser plugin for most modern browsers that will allow you to fill in all of the forms and the login forms across all of your accounts, and will store that very securely. So with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, and welcome back. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about KeePass. We just talked about LastPass and how that's a great online syncing password database. KeePass is a local database. It's a local password database, which means that the database is actually stored on your hard drive. So we have the application right here, and you can click on database and make a new database, and I'm going to enter a password. And click OK, and then I've got a new database. And from here, I can click on a new entry, and I can add that entry, and I can add the username and the password. I can have it generate a new password for me, and just like in LastPass, you can have it create character types of uppercase and lowercase numbers. I can add special characters, and I can up the number to whatever I want. And so I can click accept here, and then it saves that, and I can view it, and I can put in my username, and I can put in a title, and I will just hit OK to save it. And you can see that it comes in right here. If I wanted to, I can click edit entry, and I can add notes, I can add a URL, I can add all these things if I wanted to. But the way you use it is you manually enter your usernames and passwords into the database, and then if you need to use them, you can right-click and either copy username or copy password. And then you can paste that into whatever login form you want in whatever browser you want. So this is really helpful for those who don't want to, save their database in a cloud service. They don't trust it, which is fine. You can save it locally here on your laptop, and they make a Windows version and a Mac version, and I will put links to those in the descriptions for you. So in conclusion, KeePass X is a great offline password database, uses strong encryption, and has the ability to have folders and records of usernames and passwords. So with that, I'll see you guys in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome back. In this lesson, I want to talk about password reset questions. We've all been there. You go to log into a site and, oh no, your password's wrong, and you can't remember what that password is. And that's where the password reset questions come in. And so you go in, when you create an account, you usually set up those password reset questions, and oftentimes they're things like your mother's maiden name, where were you born, things like that. What was your dog's first name? What was your, the first car you ever had? So those are all really great ways of kind of authenticating you. But what I will tell you is that a lot of those things are very public information. As an attacker, and I've done this before in any corporate hacks or any open source intelligence gathering that I'll do, one of the best ways to figure out the answers to those questions is by just doing a little Googling on a person. Usually I can find out person's maiden name or mother's maiden name. I can find out grandparents' names and siblings' names. I can find out where you've lived in the past, because again, most of this stuff is public record. The other thing I can do is go to a site that does ancestry, like something like ancestry.com, and try and sign up as you and find out all of the people in your family tree, and now I've got first and last names of all those people. So if you've used any of those questions where you've answered your mother's maiden name, it's very easy for an attacker to find that information and try and use the password reset to gain access to your account. So a strategy for that would be pick something that is not pick a question that is not a publicly accessible piece of information. A lot of things are like, what's your favorite food? And that's not something that I can go out on the internet and Google, unless you put it out there on social media, whatnot. But things that are not publicly available information, those are the questions you want to choose. And the other strategy is, nothing says that you have to tell the truth on any of these questions. You can lie on them, right? So if you pick your mother's maiden name, put in your best friend's last name, and know that every time you ask that question, every time that question is asked of you, it's not really your mother's maiden name, it's your best friend's last name, right? So now, as an attacker, I'm totally confused because I'm putting in your mother's maiden name and it's not working, right? So if you can't find a question that is not necessarily public information, lie. Lie on the question and make sure you remember what that lie is. If you're using a password database, sometimes it's nice to be able to put those the answers to those questions in the record for that database. A lot of those password databases will allow you to store username and password and then notes, and you can put the answers to your password reset questions there. In conclusion, password reset questions, a lot of times as an attacker, I can find out the answers to your password reset questions by looking at publicly available information. So you want to make sure to choose one that isn't publicly available or lie on the question. With that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome to the section on securing your computer. In this section, we're going to talk a lot about the threats and vulnerabilities against your personal computer. Whether you have a Mac or a PC, or if you're really that advanced and you're using Linux, we're still going to talk about generally what are the threats against it, and then I'm going to go through some specific steps that you can take today to protect your computer. And we're talking about, again, protecting yourself, making yourself harder to hack than the next person. So with that, we'll talk to you in the next video. All right, so in this video, guys, I want to talk a little bit about public Wi-Fi. So we've all been there. We've all taken our laptops down to the Starbucks or the local coffee shop, or even been in a hotel and connected to the free Wi-Fi. So when I talk about public Wi-Fi, there's a couple of things to think about. Most public Wi-Fis are what's called unencrypted. If you connect to this Wi-Fi and you didn't have to put a password in, then most likely it's unencrypted. And so what does that mean? Well, encryption scrambles all the data in the air when it's going, the data going back and forth between your computer and the internet. And that protects your privacy because over the air, anybody can be sitting there and listening to the data that goes across. So unencrypted Wi-Fi means that if you're sitting in the Starbucks coffee shop, I can also be sitting in the Starbucks coffee shop, and if I'm connected or even in the same vicinity, I can just listen to the radio waves using a special device, and the devices are not that expensive, and I can capture your data. So one thing we always want to look for is, does this area have a secured Wi-Fi? And you're seeing a lot more businesses out there offering a secure Wi-Fi. You have to put a password in, and that's great. So that's the first level, first layer of security when it comes to Wi-Fi. The next thing we want to think about is who else is on the network. So the way networks are built is that you want everything to be communicating with each other. Most networks are built so that everybody can basically hear all the conversations going on. So again, if you think about it as a coffee shop. You've got multiple conversations going on at once. And you, as an individual, can sit down close to somebody and eavesdrop on their conversation. So if you're connected to the same network, you can do the exact same thing, and it's very easy to do. So we want to make sure that we're putting protections in place for people on that network to then not be able to listen to your conversation. So the idea, the analogy, if we go back to the coffee shop, would be you want to talk to your friend, but you don't want anybody in the coffee shop to know what you're talking about, so maybe you talk in code. And we'll talk about how to protect yourself in the next video in that case. But public Wi-Fi is extremely dangerous. It is really good to, if you want to just get on and you're just looking at YouTube videos or whatnot, but be very cautious in what you sign into on public Wi-Fi, because you don't want your password to be passed back and forth on that network that you don't trust. Again, going back to thinking about your risk and thinking about the threats. You know, maybe your risk tolerance is okay to get onto public Wi-Fi and browse the internet, read the news and whatnot, but you know that you don't want to sign in anything sensitive. So I don't want to sign into my bank account on public Wi-Fi, or I don't want to sign into my email on public Wi-Fi. These are the things that you have to think about when you're on that public Wi-Fi. You just have to assume that there is someone listening on that network. And maybe there isn't, but the assumption has to be made that any data that you pass back and forth on that network is going to be listened to by somebody else. So in the next video, we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to make connecting to a public Wi-Fi a little bit safer and make sure that your data is a little bit more protected. Because again, we want to make sure that it is harder to hack us than it is to hack the person next to us. Hacker's always going to go for the easier target versus the harder target. So we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I wanted to talk about protecting yourself on public Wi-Fi. We just talked about all the threats that are against you when you connect to that free public Wi-Fi, the Starbucks Wi-Fi or the hotel Wi-Fi. And that can be pretty scary, but there is an effective way of protecting yourself against these threats. And one of the easiest ways to protect yourself is by using a VPN. So a virtual private network basically creates an encrypted tunnel to some server out on the internet that you would theoretically trust. And what happens is when you connect to the public Wi-Fi, you initiate your VPN tunnel, and then all of your traffic, all your web browsing, your Facebook Messenger, your Skype, your all that fun stuff, goes through that encrypted tunnel. So anyone who is on that public network, all they see is encrypted gibberish, and that encrypted tunnel goes to the endpoint, where the server of the VPN software that you use, and it goes out and goes out to the internet and does what it needs to do. So if you're browsing to the web, your browser is going to initiate the connection and push it through the VPN tunnel to the VPN server. This VPN server is then going to go out to whatever website you're going to, request that data, and send it back through that tunnel. So now you've got this beautiful encrypted tunnel, and that's really helpful at protecting yourself. There is one other way to do it. And a lot of the newer phones nowadays, all the new iPhones and whatnot, will have the ability to tether your computer to your phone. So what that does is it creates your own private Wi-Fi network. And you could connect your computer or your tablet or whatnot to your phone's private Wi-Fi. And then all of your data goes out your phone as opposed to going out the public Wi-Fi. Now, the drawback there is, at least in the United States, data caps are expensive, and a lot of the providers, the cellular providers, are putting caps on that tethering data. But if you are lucky enough to have, say, an unlimited plan, you have no need to connect to a public Wi-Fi. You can always use your cell phone as your personal hotspot. And so both of those are effective ways of protecting yourself. As far as VPN providers are concerned, my personal recommendation is a company called PIA, or Private Internet Access, and they do a very good job of providing VPN endpoints all over the world. They're fast, and they don't require that you provide a name or an address or anything like that to sign up for their service. You can pay with your credit card. You can go down to Walmart or Target or any number of other big box retailers and purchase a gift card, and then pay PIA with that gift card, which further anonymizes your data. And then it also allows you to use Bitcoin, which is the anonymous digital currency, to pay for their service. So I would suggest going out and checking out PIA. They are a great company, great VPN provider, and one that I use personally. So in conclusion, use a VPN. That is your protection when you connect to public Wi-Fis. So with that, I hope to see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to talk to you in this video about antivirus and antivirus solutions. And in the industry, antivirus is kind of touted as like the big thing, and everybody thinks, oh, an antivirus solution will protect me. And I'm here to tell you that it is important to have your antivirus solution and to use it, but I think that it's important to also make sure that everybody understands that antivirus isn't the panacea for all cybersecurity issues. So how does antivirus work? Well, one of the main ways it works is it scans a file that you download, that you open, scans your hard drive, and what it is looking for is it's looking for what we call a signature. And those signatures are looking for little snippets of text or code or whatnot within a file in order to determine if it's bad. Now, there's two problems with that. One is, as an adversary or as an attacker, I can manipulate my code to evade antivirus, right? Antivirus has got a very set signature, and if I know that, then I'm going to change my code just ever so slightly. I might add some random data in there that kind of throws it off, and antivirus won't grab it. The other issue with that is that if the virus has never been seen before, or it's a brand new virus, antivirus is largely ineffective at capturing or telling you that a certain file is bad. So I'm not saying this to scare everyone. I just want you to understand that just because you have an antivirus application does not mean that you are 100% protected against viruses. And as far as viruses are concerned and antivirus, there's also this age-old adage of, well, Macs don't get viruses. And that's not true. What happens here, and where that came from, is that the majority of people on the world, or in corporate settings and even home settings, have a Windows machine, right? So if you think about yourself, or again, put yourself into the shoes of the attacker. If I am going after people and I want to get the best bang for my buck, I'm going to write a Windows virus because the majority of people are running a Windows operating system. There are Mac viruses, there are just not as many of them as there are on Windows. So, those people who have Macs, you are slightly more protected, but only because it's not as prevalent as an operating system as Windows is. Now that is changing. Apple has come out with a lot of new great laptops and features in their operating system, and we're starting to see a shift of home users moving to the Mac operating system and buying Macs. But usually Windows is your big platform. So a lot of people ask me, what antivirus should I be using? Well, it's tough to give you a good recommendation on antivirus. I would say that a lot of the pay-for-ones, the ones that a lot of the big corporations use, are decent at detecting viruses. So the big pay-for-ones I recommend, if you can get McAfee or Symantec or Sophos, all three of those are really good antivirus solutions. There are some free ones. AVG is one that I've used for years, and it's a great great antivirus solution. And then ClamAV is also a free solution. It's not as good as, I would say, like the pay for or like even AVG, but it does a decent job. So if you're on a budget, AVG is your kind of go-to. If not, go check out some of the McAfees or Symantecs of the world. The other thing you should think about is if you work for a company that uses AV or uses like a McAfee or a Symantec, oftentimes they'll offer you a discount on a home purchase for that software. So if you work for a larger corporation and you can go to like the employee discounts area, sometimes they'll have a discount for, if your company uses Symantec, Symantec will offer you, their antivirus solution for, I don't know, say $10, for example. I don't know if that's the real price, but it's usually pretty affordable. So check that out before you start shopping around for full-priced antivirus solutions. Then the other thing I want to mention is if you're running Windows 10, the newest operating system Windows, it has an application on there called Windows Defender. And Windows Defender has actually become a pretty decent antivirus solution. So if you are truly on a budget, I would say if you can afford the upgrade to Windows 10, or you already have a Windows 10 machine, activating the Windows Defender can really help cut down on some of the broad-based viruses out there, some of the things that are a little older and more well-known than that. So activating Windows Defender, and we'll talk about that when we talk about securing your Windows box in a couple of videos. So takeaways on antivirus, it's still an important part of your defense of yourself and your family, but it is not the catch-all, end-all, be-all of cybersecurity defense. So ensuring that you have one is important, but making sure that you do other things to secure your operating system in your computer is vitally important. So with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. All right, hey guys, welcome back. I want to talk to you in this video about patching. So everybody you've got your computer, you've got your iPhone, iPad, Android device, whatever you've got, and everybody has seen the update window saying new updates are ready to be applied. And I know because I'm guilty of it myself. I'm used to just hitting we'll do that again or later tonight or another time. But I want to explain to you why that's really important. What patches are as software developers create software, they inherently create vulnerabilities in that software, and it's usually done by accident. Typically, the developer will code something up and they won't think about, how could an attacker manipulate this in order to kind of get what they're looking at. So what will happen when a vulnerability is found is the developers will communicate with the person who found the vulnerability, find out what the technical means of exploiting that vulnerability are, and then they'll fix it and they issue a patch. So as a bad guy, I am looking for people who don't patch their software. Because I know that there's a vulnerability that I can use to get into your computer, right? So, and oftentimes what happens is you've got a vulnerability that is disclosed to the manufacturer, and if it's done right, the vulnerability isn't disclosed to the world, isn't told, the people in the world don't know about it until the manufacturer issues a patch and says, we're issuing a patch to fix this vulnerability that so-and-so disclosed to us. But the time between the time when the vulnerability is disclosed and the patch is issued is kind of a weird time, because there's no fix for it, and if the vulnerability were to get out, you would see a rash of exploitations, and that's called, what we call in the industry, a zero-day exploitation. It means that there's no patch available yet, or that one is coming, right? So I say all this to say, when you see those updates come in, I know it's inconvenient to apply it now and we just hit the next button and we'll wait for the next time, but it is really, really important to ensure that those patches get installed, because the more patches you have available to your system that haven't been installed, the more risk you are putting on yourself of potentially getting exploited. So we talked about vulnerabilities. What systems and what applications do we care the most about? Well, if you're running a Windows system, running those Windows patches every month, and Windows issues their patches on a set schedule. It's the second Tuesday of every month. In the industry, we call it Patch Tuesday. So you can set up a calendar notification and say, make sure you install Windows patches. Or when we get to, in the class later, in a couple of videos, we're going to talk about securing your system. And I'm going to talk to you about setting up automatic patching for a lot of these things. So Windows patches, set up automatic patching. The other things that we want to patch on a regular basis is your browser. Whether you're using Firefox or Chrome or Internet Explorer or one of the other variations, you want to make sure that you check on a regular basis that it is up to date, the software is up to date, and you don't have any patches, because that's why a lot of adversaries will get into your computer. Is they'll exploit a vulnerability in a browser that will allow them to have your browser run some code, and then you have a virus installed in your system and you're at more risk. So having an up-to-date browser is probably the most vital application on your system that you need to make sure is updated. The other ones that we see a lot of exploitation against are things like if you run Java or you run Flash Player or whatnot. And a lot of these things, PDF Adobe, Acrobat, and a lot of the Microsoft Office suites. And they'll all oftentimes, put a little pop-up in the bottom of your screen saying, hey, an update is available, right? So it is vitally important that you patch those systems. And like I said, we'll talk in a couple of videos about securing your Windows or securing your Mac system. And I will go through and show you how to make those patches automatically update for you. That way you don't really have to think that much about it. So all that to say, in conclusion, patching is vitally important and it really makes your system more secure. So the next time you see a pop-up in the bottom of your window that says patches available, make sure you install those patches. And with that, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Hey guys, so in this video, I wanted to talk about something that I think a lot of people overlook, and that's USB drive security. Yeah, I'm talking about these little guys right here. Most people don't realize how incredibly dangerous a USB drive actually is. So as an attacker, I can put my code on this USB drive, and if I can get you as my victim to plug that USB drive into your computer, I can do a whole litany of things. I can install my malware. I can install a keylogger. I can basically take the contents of my documents and store it back on this drive. There's a lot of things I can do. The other thing that's kind of fun for me is there's a device that basically looks like a USB drive, something like this, but what it does is it emulates a USB keyboard, and I can program key commands into it. So as soon as you plug it into your computer, it recognizes it as a keyboard and then it types out commands. So in an instant, I can, copy all of your files, I can turn off your firewall, I can turn your antivirus off, I can install malware, I can do a lot of things. And most people don't realize it because the USB drives are incredibly handy when you're talking about moving files back and forth. They've become smaller and smaller with more and more storage, and everybody loves them. So how do you protect yourself against them? Well, not all USB drives are bad. Obviously, things that you buy yourself and that you always maintain, probably not going to have a virus or anything on it. But don't pick up strange USB drives out in the wild and just plug them into your computer. Be cautious and think about who you're getting that USB drive from. So let me tell you a little story about ethical hacks that I've done in the past. Companies are very concerned about these USB thumb drives. And so what I'll do is what's called a USB drop test. And I'll go buy about 100 of these things, and I will program my malware on them, and I'll throw them out into a parking lot of the company. And I'll just wait and see. I say about 50% of the time, somebody picks up one and plugs it into their work computer or plugs it into their home computer. And now I've got the ability to install my malware and my virus on their computer. So you want to think about, where is this thumb drive coming from? Who gave it to me? Another big threat we see a lot is thumb drives that are given out at conferences. If you're a professional person, you go to a conference, you usually get like some kind of goodie bag, and a lot of times there'll be a thumb drive popped in there. You really want to be careful with those. I'm not saying that all of them are bad, but again, think about your risk profile. Do you care about what could happen if somebody had put malware on that thumb drive? So with that, just be very cautious. Final thoughts, be cautious about thumb drives. I don't particularly listen or take anybody else's thumb drives. I always keep control of my own, and that's it. So that's my tip to you. Just be cautious about it. So we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this lesson, I want to talk about an emerging threat and something that most home users and honestly a lot of corporate people are very concerned about. And it's a scam called ransomware. So this is a way that, again, when we step back into the attacker's shoes, we want to think about their motivations, and the motivation being money. So with ransomware, what they do is they code up a virus, and how they get that virus to you is they do that in multiple different ways. But once the virus is installed, it encrypts every file on your hard drive. Usually things like in your My Documents, all your pictures, all your, if you're in college, all your papers and everything. So it encrypts all of that with a very secure encryption algorithm and a very long decryption key or decryption password. And then it sends that decryption password back to the attacker, right? And puts a nice big pop-up on your screen. And I have to chuckle. It's not really funny because the people who are victims of this are really have a problem. But they say on their pop-up, for your security, we've encrypted all of your data, right? And so once the data is encrypted, you can't access it, and there is no way to decrypt it without having that password. And the password is so long that guessing the password is not really an option. It would take thousands of years on a normal computer to guess the password for this decryption. So they're basically holding your files ransom, and they ask you to pay them money in order to get your files back. At the time of this filming, the ransom right now is going anywhere between $300 US and $500 US. There are a few outfits out there that are charging more, and again, there are a few that are charging less, but your average is $300 to $500. That's a lot. That's a fair amount of money. And the thing about it is that the attackers don't care so much how many people they infect or whether or not those people pay them or not. Their costs is the cost of the malware, the cost of the infrastructure to run it. If they get, they send out 1,000 emails and they get 100 people to click the link, then they've infected 100 people at $500. You can do the math. The return on investment for them is high. So they're running it like a business, if you will. And ransomware has caused millions, if not even trillions worth of damage across the world. And so, we think about, okay, well, why does this all happen? Well, again, stepping back into the attacker's mindset, there is a very low risk for the attacker. They're usually housed, or it's usually some group in a country where extradition is not going to happen, and law enforcement may turn a blind eye. These are we see a lot of ransomware come out of Russia. We see a lot of ransomware come out of third world countries in Africa and whatnot. Just because the likelihood of them getting caught is very low. And they're not going to be shipped out to a larger country where they can then be prosecuted for it. So they have little to no risk in doing this, and people will pay. And the reason people pay is because they actually do unlock your files if you pay. It's not one of those scams where it's pay me money and I'll pretend to do something, or I'll promise to unlock your files and then you never hear from me again. The majority of the ransomware viruses, the adversary or the attackers actually do unlock your files. So how do you protect against this? It's very, very difficult, because from a cybersecurity expert perspective, I want to tell you, don't pay the ransom, right? Because if no one pays the ransom, then these people aren't going to continue to do this attack. But because people do pay the ransom, that's why these attacks continue to happen. So one of the most effective ways of protecting yourself against these ransomware attacks is to do a backup. And we'll talk about multiple ways of doing backups in another video, but the idea here is that even if all of your files are encrypted, that's fine. You've got a backup. So you can delete all the encrypted files and restore from an older backup where all the files weren't encrypted. And so it's important to maintain a good backup system, and you want to make sure that if you're backing up to, say, just a hard drive, a USB hard drive, that you don't keep that USB hard drive hooked up to your computer at all times. The problem is that the adversaries do know about how people back up, and if it is being backed up to a USB hard drive, they actually will see that the USB hard drive is attached to your computer, and they will encrypt all the files on the USB hard drive, which then makes your backup kind of useless. So the mitigation here, right? Back up your files. If you get hit with a ransomware, don't worry about it. clean up the infection with your antivirus solution or your anti-malware solution, delete all your encrypted files, and then restore from a backup to a clean state. So takeaways on this lesson is ransomware encrypts your files and holds them for ransom. If you are willing to pay the money, you probably will get your files back. And if not, backups are the solution to ransomware. Just make sure that those backups are either off-site in a cloud environment like Dropbox or whatnot, or that if it's a local hard drive, that local hard drive is not always connected to your computer. That way the ransomware can't encrypt your backups as well. So with that, I hope to see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about securing your Windows machine. If you're a Windows user, this video is for you. We're going to talk about what you can do to make your Windows machine more secure. And the way I'm going to do that is we're going to jump into a screen share and I'm going to show you how you can secure your machine, what settings to change, and what things to install. So with that, let's jump into the screen share. All right, so what we've got here is we've got a Windows 10 install, and we want to make sure that we change a couple of settings to ensure that it is more secure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the Windows bar, and I'm going to click on Settings. And the Settings window will come up, and the first thing I want to search for is Updates. And we'll do Windows Update Settings. And these are your Windows updates. These are your patches that will happen, right? So you obviously want to check for new updates as you come along, but we want to go to some advanced options and change a few things. First, we want to set up give me updates for other Microsoft products when I update Windows. So if you've got Microsoft Office installed or any of the other Microsoft products, this will make sure that you are getting those updates. You can choose this automatically download updates even over metered data connections. This is typically a setting if you've got a Wi-Fi card, a cellular card in your system, and you have cellular data on your system. So you have to, gauge that for yourself as to whether or not you want those downloaded automatically. And then make sure down here you've got this semi-annual channel targeted set up. This means that you'll get the patches that are, the most tested as of today, right? So we've got the advanced options set up for Windows Update. Next, we want to go to Windows Security, and you can open the Windows Defender Security Center. And Windows Defender is the new way that you kind of set up Windows and you protect Windows. So you want to make sure that you've got check marks on all of these things here, that everything is set properly. For virus and threat protection, you can click on it and you can run a scan, run an advanced scan, and just make sure that there aren't any actions needed here. You can make sure that your firewall is turned on in the firewall settings, and then you can ensure that you've got your device security set up, that core isolation is set up, and this is will help making sure that if malware is installed that it doesn't necessarily get access to your sensitive information. So once you've got all that set up, you can then go to the backup section. This is where you can start backing up your stuff. And again, the backups are vitally important for ransomware protection. So here you can add a drive and you can set up a backup routine. And again, if you have a USB hard drive, I would suggest plugging it in and setting up a backup setup. But again, remember that once the backup is finished, you should unplug that USB drive, and you shouldn't keep it plugged in all the time to your system. The next thing we want to do is look at a setting called UAC, and that's User Account Control. And what this does is when you try to install new software or whatnot, it gives you a pop-up that says, you're requesting elevated privileges to install your the software. Do you accept? And this setting is the default. It's recommended when you kind of only use familiar apps and you're only going to familiar websites. I highly recommend changing it to always notify, and then that way anytime software is installed on your system, it will notify you that it's trying to get elevated privileges to run that system, right? So we'll set that. And here, this is the user account control. So when you make a change or you run system, this is going to pop up and all you have to do is hit yes. But that helps to protect your system. So next we're going to set up your encrypted hard drive, and we're going to use Windows built-in encryption called BitLocker. We're going to click Manage BitLocker. All right, so this is BitLocker, and you can see that right now we have BitLocker turned off. All you have to do is click Turn on BitLocker, and it will step you through the process of ensuring that your hard drive is encrypted. So in conclusion, all you really have to do is change a couple of settings to make sure that Windows is more secure. The big thing on Windows is making sure that updates are installed on a regular basis and that you're rebooting as you need, as Windows Update tells you to do that. So just follow these few simple steps and you should be much more secure than most other people out there. With that, we'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about things you can do to make your Mac more secure. So if you're a Mac iOS user, then this video is for you. We're going to do the same thing we did with the Windows video, and we're going to jump into a screen share where I'll show you all the settings that you need to change on your Mac to make it a more secure operating system for you. So with that, let's jump into the screen share. All right, guys. So first thing we want to do when we start thinking about securing your Mac is we want to take a look at the system preferences. And the system preferences is kind of like the system settings for the entire Mac operating system. We want to first start with the security and privacy icon. And we want to start with general. So first thing we want to do is make sure a login password has been set for this user. A lot of times you can start up a Mac with no password, which may be fine for a desktop that sits in your house, but honestly, I would suggest setting a password regardless. One of the things I always do is I check this require password immediately after sleep or screensaver begins. This is really helpful on a laptop because when you close the window or the screen, it goes to sleep. If you close the screen, then immediately when it comes back to life, you need to put a password in. This means that if you're sitting in a coffee shop or you're sitting in the library or something, you close your screen, nobody can come by right after and open it up and get right into your Mac. So we want to make sure that's checked. We also want to make sure that this allow apps downloaded from the App Store and identified developers only. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to check every executable or every program that you download and see if it was downloaded from the App Store or from some identified third-party developer. If it's not, it's going to warn you every time you try and run that program, saying, hey, this isn't from some identified developer, it wasn't downloaded from the Mac Store, which usually is fine, but you want to know that. So you can, once it warns you once, you can bypass it and say, okay, I trust this application, that's fine. The next thing you want to go to the File Vault tab. You want to make sure that you turn on File Vault. And what File Vault is it's the full disk encryption. It encrypts the hard drive of your Mac. And this is important because if your Mac ever gets stolen for some reason, or somebody else gets a hold of it that you don't want, if your hard drive is not encrypted, what they can do is they can take the hard drive out, make a full copy of the hard drive, and put it back in. And then this allows whoever took that copy of the hard drive access to all of your files without you being able to do anything. If File Vault is turned on, they can still take the hard drive out and make a copy, but again, that copy is encrypted. So they would need your password in order to decrypt that File Vault, or that copy of your hard drive. The next thing we want to do is we want to go to the firewall and just make sure that the firewall is on. If it's off, make sure it's turned on. That way, if anybody is on the same network as you, they can't get into your machine because the firewall will block the network connections coming into your machine. Finally, we want to go to the Privacy tab. Now, the Privacy tab is where you allow certain functions of the Mac access to different programs. So let's take, for example, Location Services. Location Services provides applications with your exact location. And that is usually determined by what network you're connected to. But if you've seen it on like your iPhone or your Mac or your iPad, where it'll take the GPS location. This allows you to give access to certain applications, that location services, and then deny that to others. So if you don't want certain programs knowing exactly where you are, you want to make sure that those programs are unchecked here. And the same thing for the rest of these resources here. You're giving access to application. You're giving access applications to your contacts, to your calendars, any of your photos, whatnot. So you want to make sure that you double check all of the accesses on this page and ensure that you're okay with any of the applications that have access to potentially sensitive information in any of these things. All right, next, after we've gone through the security and privacy window, we want to go to the backup, and that's to the time machine area. So Apple provides us with actually a really great backup solution, and that's the time machine. So if you open up Time Machine, you can check backup automatically, and then you can click select a disk. And this is where you want to have a external disk, usually a USB hard drive that you can plug into your Mac and put all of your backups on that that hard drive. And this is something you don't want to be connected to your machine all the time, in the rare case of ransomware, where malware would get installed on your machine and encrypt all of your files. If you have backups and that backup is not connected to your Mac at the time the ransomware is installed, you have backups and you can restore those backups to any Mac you want. This is also one way that a lot of people will transfer their files from one Mac to another, is through a Time Machine backup. So you want to make sure Time Machine is on and that you have an external hard drive to plug in and store those Time Machine backups on. Finally, we want to go back to the users and groups, and we want to see the current users that are on this system. You can see that I've got a user account here and that I'm an administrator. And that's great, but you want to make sure that on your day-to-day uses of your Mac, you want to be running as a non-administrator. What this does is it helps to prevent any bad software from being installed. Most of the time, you can't install software on any computer unless you're an administrator. So what I would do is I'm going to unlock my users and preferences, put in my password, and then I would like to add a new user, and I can add a standard user account. And this will be the user account that I would use on my Mac on a day-to-day basis. And I'll only log into the administrator account when I absolutely need to install some software, or the system says you need to be an admin to do something. And this just prevents any malware from trying to install itself on your system without your knowledge. So really great way of protecting yourself. And so that's it. That by default, Mac is pretty secure, so we don't have to do much to it. But these are a few things that oftentimes people overlook when they're using their Mac or they're first setting their Mac up. So you want to make sure that you follow these steps and make sure that your Mac is more secure. And with that, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome back. In this lesson, I want to talk about a threat against your browser called drive-by downloads. So a drive-by download is very similar to what it sounds. As you go to a website, code runs in your browser, and that code can affect your computer as well. So what does an adversary do to initiate a drive-by download? What they'll do is they will go to a legitimate website and they will compromise that legitimate website. Maybe that website is a blog that you follow, and if it's using the most common blogging software out there, WordPress. WordPress has some vulnerabilities that if the blog author does not update WordPress on a regular basis, it is possible for an adversary to get in and kind of put their code into that WordPress blog. So what happens is as you go to the WordPress blog in your browser loads all of the content, loads the text, the pictures, maybe some videos, some advertisements and whatnot. But in there's also a little piece of code that the attacker has put in there, and your browser will run that code. And that code can do things like download a file or download an executable to your desktop or your computer and install that. And the way that really works, and the vulnerability they're exploiting, is first the vulnerability in the website in question, and then also a vulnerability in your browser. So browsers typically have protections in place to prevent bad code from running and doing things like installing viruses and whatnot. But if you don't keep your browser up to date, or it's a brand new vulnerability, your browser is probably going to run that code. So your biggest and your best mitigation against a drive-by download is making sure that your browser is always up to date. And then there are a couple other plugins that you can use to protect yourself against some of these drive-by downloads and whatnot. And we'll talk about those in this section. Talk about the browser plugins that protect you. Another thing that attackers will oftentimes do is they'll compromise advertisements, the web advertisements that we see all over the place. And it may not necessarily be something that the blog author or whatever website you're going to knows about. They've just have signed up for an ad network to put ads on their website, and the attacker has taken out an ad that has some bad code in it. A lot of the kind of weird third-party ad networks will allow this kind of stuff, or not necessarily allow it, but they don't check for bad code in the advertisements. So one of the ways that I tell people to protect themselves is block the advertisements. And advertisements, we all are annoyed by seeing massive ads on any website. There are plugins that you can put into your browser that will block these advertisements, and we'll go over some of those when we talk about browser plugins in this section. So yet another thing you can do to protect yourself against drive-by downloads is ensuring that your browser, third-party browser applications are up to date. So I talked about patching your browser, and that's really important, but oftentimes you'll run across a website that uses an application like Java or Flash. And those are two kind of most common third-party applications that you have to install in order to run. We see this running on a lot of like gaming sites and whatnot. So if you play online games, oftentimes you'll have Java or Flash installed. And that's another way that attackers will get into your computer, is putting code on a website that starts up Java and exploits a vulnerability in Java to install their virus on your system. So ensuring that those are patched on a regular basis, and that when a website comes up and that you see a pop-up that says, do you want to run Flash or do you want to run Java? If you don't explicitly trust this website, don't run those little applets. Hit no, I don't want to run Java. No, I don't want to run Flash. And that will protect you. So in conclusion, a drive-by download is an attack where the adversary is kind of exploiting your browser and exploiting your trust in the website that you're going to. So the best ways to protect yourself: make sure your browser is up to date, and install some security plugins that we'll talk about later in this section. So with that, hope to see you in the next lesson. Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk to you about HTTPS. Because we're talking about browser security in this section, we have to talk about the secure communication between your browser and the server. We've all been browsing to websites and we probably just we either ignore it or take it for granted, but there's typically, next to the browser URL, there's a green lock. And the green lock tells us that the connection between your browser and the server that is sending the information is secure. So what does that mean? Well, when you go to a website that is secure, your browser reaches out to the server and says, I want a secure connection, and then they negotiate. There's a lot of technical stuff that goes on there, but it happens pretty quickly. And what they're doing is they're securely sharing a password, a very random, long password. But once that they've shared that, they then use that to encrypt all data that goes across. So if you don't see that lock, what that means is that data that is going from your browser to the server is unencrypted, and anybody who is listening on your network can view that data. So when you go to sites that are important to you, you want to make sure that they're always using HTTPS. And so you put in, most browsers will go there automatically, but you type in HTTPS:// and then the website. And that should take you to the secure version. Now you always want to check to make sure that there is a green lock in the corner of the browser that tells you it's a secure website. That green lock is the only thing that tells you that it's secure. So you can actually go to HTTPS sites that don't have a green lock, and that just means that it's unsecured and your browser wasn't able to secure it. So in conclusion, when you're browsing the web, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the green lock next to the URL to ensure that your communication between your browser and the server is fully encrypted. And that will make sure that data you send across, whether it be your username or password or anything else, is secure. So with that, we'll see you in the next lesson. Alright, hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to talk to you about something that is kind of vitally important in your online browsing habits, and that's using HTTPS. We talked about what HTTPS is and why it's important. So I want to talk to you about a browser plugin that is available for most of the modern browsers, Firefox and Chrome, called HTTPS Everywhere. And what this browser plugin does is it looks at all of the connections as you browse websites. Your browser will connect to multiple servers around the world, because most websites will embed images or videos or whatnot from other websites. And what HTTPS Everywhere will do is it will check to see if those embedded items have a secure connection. And if it does have a secure connection, it will force your browser to load it in a secure manner. The other thing it does is if you go to a website that has a secure connection but is not necessarily set up properly to show you the secure connection over the unsecure connection, it will force your browser to load the secure connection automatically. So this happens when you go to a lot of times smaller websites. Some smaller blogs and whatnot may not have configured their website properly to load the secure connection. And again, we're always looking for the secure lock on every website that we go to, and we don't want to be putting any private information into a website that doesn't have that secure lock. So what you can do is you can, I'll post this link in the description, but you can just Google HTTPS Everywhere, and it will bring you to this website here, and you can then click on the Install in Chrome button, and it will say add the HTTPS Everywhere extension. If you're in Firefox, you do that as well. Now I already have it installed, so it just adds this nice little logo right here, the HTTPS Everywhere logo. And I can click on that and I can see that, it says enable HTTPS Everywhere. As long as that's checked, you know that most sites that you're going to go to are going to be loaded in a secure manner. And so the other thing you can do is, if you have a site that does not load securely, but you know they have a secure site, you can click add a rule for this site. And it will show you, okay, what host, what is the URL you want. And if you click add rule, it will add that rule to your local plugin database. And then every time you visit that site, it will force your browser to load the secure site. Now this is only, you can only use this if you know that the site in question loads insecurely but has a secure side to it. If they have a security certificate installed, then you can use this. So HTTPS Everywhere protects your day-to-day browsing, protects your information from being stolen from hackers who are listening on the same network. And it's a free plugin provided by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and I highly suggest that everybody go out and install it. So with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks. Alright, hey guys, welcome back. I wanted to talk in this video about another browser plugin that I highly recommend, yet another project of the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And this plugin is called the Privacy Badger. And what the Privacy Badger does is it provides you, or it tracks the trackers. So as you browse the internet, there are a lot of advertising trackers out there that will track the links you click on, they track the items you view in different web stores and whatnot. And then most of the time it's there to provide you with or provide advertisers with your browsing history. And that's something that may not necessarily be in your risk profile that you care so much about, but a lot of people are concerned with all these different companies are tracking my whereabouts and they can pinpoint me and where I've gone. That's something that I just don't want, right? I mean, if you think about Have you ever been to a website, say you've gone to Amazon and you've looked at a couple items on Amazon, and then the next day you're browsing Facebook, for example, and you see an advertisement for that exact item that you were browsing on Amazon? That's what's happening, is that there are trackers out there that are tracking your browsing history and saving that history. So the privacy badger attempts to try and thwart the trackers out there. So to install it, you just go to this site, and again, I'll put this link in the description, and you click on Install Privacy Badger, and you hit Add Extension. It has an option for Firefox or Opera as well. Since I already have it installed, I'm going to show you what it looks like right here. It says the Privacy Badger here detected a potential tracker on this page, and it gives you all the different trackers. You can allow a certain tracker, you can block the cookies from the tracker, which are one of the ways that it's most trackers are tracking your browsing history is through cookies in your browser. Or you can completely block the domain and your browser won't even load the data. Now, completely blocking the domain on some cases will break a website. So a lot of times just setting that to block the cookies is important. But the Privacy Badger does a good job, and you don't really even need to do much to it to allow it to protect your private information. So if we go to a website that tracks a lot, let's take, for example, CNN.com. Let's go there. We can see the Privacy Badger says there is a lot of things tracking us right now. A lot of different trackers, and you can see that it looks at a few of these things and says, you know what, they're not good, and a few of them are okay. Well, they're okay to track, and the Privacy Badger does a good job of kind of looking at those the code on the website and determining whether or not it's a good tracker or a bad tracker. And this is based on crowdsourcing that. So like everybody who has the Privacy Badger installed, the EFF takes that information and kind of determines what trackers are out there that are tracking across multiple websites, and tells you whether or not it's good or not. So here we are looking at the Privacy Badger. If there was something broken on the website, we could go and disable the Privacy Badger for this site and allow it to work. If the Privacy Badger does break something on a website, this little link right here will let the EFF know, and they can kind of investigate what happened and figure out the best way of protecting your private information while at the same time allowing you to view the site. So they try to do that balance. You can also individually turn things off. So this particular tracker here, if I decided I didn't really want that to be tracking me, I could just turn it off, and now that tracker can't track me anymore. I'm going to leave it on because I think I trust the EFF in their in what they say is good and bad. So that is the Privacy Badger. So in conclusion here, we looked at the Privacy Badger as a way to protect yourself from online advertising and online tracking. And it's a free install or free browser plugin from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and it's one that I highly recommend that everybody install. So with that, I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks.